workshop. This is the first time in our convention's history that we had this type of workshop, obviously because of what we're seeing in our nation today. We have put on, this is the second time in our association that we brought experts from our own association. This is a member, a product of our community. We have two others in the DC area. We're international. And we have to make people aware of really the conclusion they're coming to is that really the foundational establishment of Islam in America, the Association of Imam Mohammed, is one of the primary de-radicalization movements in America right now. And we set out with DHS 2 months ago, and they said we haven't had anybody specifically coming out of Imam Muhammad's community that have been moving towards extremism. What is the secret? What are you all doing? What have you all done? And so we kind of talked about our history. And they said, we want you all to be out front more. And and we want to give you all money, really. But we're not going to give it to you. You got to give us something. And so this is some of the things that we'll be doing. We're partnering. This is an expert. This is one of our experts right here. Who will be speaking to us. He does this is his profession on a daily basis. You may have seen him on CNN, you may have seen him on C-SPAN. He's also been at hearings, testifying to various things. We certainly see there is an element in quote-unquote the Islamic world that's causing them to become extreme. You're going to get an up-close and personal look at some of those things, some of the technical stuff that many may not be aware of from him. You have an opportunity to ask questions as well as he goes through the presentation. So I'm going to turn it over to our brother. This is Yahya Fanusi. Some of you may know his wife, Fatima Fanusi. She was at the 2009 convention that Mosque put on, and she did down at a presentation. Her dissertation piece was on Farad. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. And she's one of our scholars.
Yeah.
So this is their dynamic dual team, both of them. In fact, she's also in this industry, in this business too. And so we're going to turn it over to our brother. We don't have a lot of time now, so I'm going to turn it over to our brother Yahya Fanusi. He flew in specifically for this right here. So we thank the Mosque for making sure they're capturing this so they can make sure it's exposed to other people, share with other people who are not here, so more see it than what's in the room. Inshallah, this is a very important segment.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. So it's very, very wonderful to be here. It's an honor to present before you on something that I think is very important. So countering or confronting violent extremism, what do we think about? There are a couple of things I'm going to do. Two quick objectives. One objective is to explain this orientation and methods that we see terrorist groups who are trying to recruit religious Muslims. Why are they doing it? How are they doing it? And I use that terminology for a reason. There are terrorist groups who are trying to recruit religious Muslims. So that impacts their message and how they do and how we're going to work against it. And I'm going to explain this from the perspective of someone who's a counterterrorism analyst. I worked in the government for several years in the intel community, in the intelligence community, for several years as a counterterrorism analyst. And I worked on looking at these groups. But I'm also speaking to you from the perspective of someone who is part of the community, who is Muslim. And just a quick sort of example of that, so you know a little bit of my background. I grew up in California, was born and raised. My father is from West Africa, but we weren't Muslim. I embraced Islam in 1997 in college, when I was in California. But immediately, within a couple of years, really became attached to the Muslim community. So as early as I think 2000, I was at the 2000 Ramadan session, right? Just gotten out of grad school, got married. And I was at most of the Ramadan sessions after that, probably missed one or two, but at least several Ramadan sessions. So even when I joined the government, I was a part of the community. So some of you might not have talked to me, but you might recognize my face because I've been around. So with that, I also want to be able to explain the value in our community coming from Imam Muhammad's leadership, his legacy, and our direction to countering this. So let's begin first with a little quiz. Hold on. Here we go. So a little quiz. Anyone remember this person or know who this person is?
Yeah.
Yes?
No.
Who is it? Oh, No. You seen them, but not sure, right? 2009, Detroit.
Underwear.
There you go. Underwear bomber. Umar Farouk Abdul Muttalib, as you may know, Christmas Day, he was on an airline. He tried to ignite the airline. The airplane did not work, right? But what do we know about him? He's Nigerian, but he came from a wealthy Nigerian family, attended private international schools. He spent time in London, right? So this was someone who was very well educated. You know, because a lot of times we have this idea, these terrorists, you know, what's motivating them is they, you know, don't have opportunity or education. There's something different happening with him. He was very educated, more educated than most Nigerians, right? Of course, the bomb failed, no deaths. Some of you, I'm sure, will recognize this person. Sound look familiar?
Yeah. Texas, man.
Yeah, 2009, Texas, Fort Hood. This was the psychiatrist, who's an American, Palestinian descent, army psychiatrist. And you may remember the story, right? Went on the rampage. He basically felt that the wars in Iraq, wars in Afghanistan, were a war in Islam. And he had this feeling that he wanted to switch sides, and he took things into his own hands. And you know the story of what happened, right? Very sort of tragic thing in terms of the people that he killed, currently on death row. This is a well-known individual when we talk about violent extremism in the U.S. and overseas. Anyone know this person by face? By Anwar al-Awlaki.
Yeah.
Okay, American, born in New Mexico, Yemeni background, Yemeni parents, very popular Imam, particularly in the early 2000s, very articulate. He appealed particularly to young people because while he could speak Arabic very well, he was an Imam of a couple different mosques. Then he started producing lectures. His lectures were very popular. Some of them just very, very benign, very stories about the Prophet's life, right? And he could speak Arabic very well. He could talk about the seerah, and he was appealing to Western Muslims in particular. But there was a point in his career when he left the U.S. and his message became more radical. He started to sort of directly talk about what is the Islamic concept of jihad, and specifically telling folks, to his audience, that jihad, that terrorism can be seen as jihad. So he became very influential. Again, early lectures, again, very benign, well-respected Imam, but then later, when he left the U.S., became more focused on violence, started talking about what was happening around the world, and really started to recruit and help people really have this idea that their job as a Muslim was to go make hijrah and wage jihad, quote unquote. Again, he focused on Muslims in the West, and the underwear bomber, Nidal Hassan, and others were very influenced by him, again, by his articulate voice. And he eventually actually became a true card-carrying member of Al-Qaeda. So this is someone who was an imam in the U.S., he was an imam in Virginia, later on went to Yemen, and he became part of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which was very active in trying to plot attacks. The underwear bomber was a plot which came out of that group. So, and he was killed in 2011. You know where this is? Boston. Yeah, Boston Marathon bombing, April 2013. You know the details. Two brothers took this, participated in this. They were in the U.S. young guys, right? Ethnic Chechens. One was killed in a firefight with the police. Also, you could tell that al-Awlaki was very influential in them. Again, influential, inspired by his understanding of what jihad was and is, and what their duty as young Muslims was. So they took matters into their own hand and killed a few people. Now, right now, what's the big deal? People are talking about ISIS, right? ISIS, because of all the stuff we're seeing. I don't even have to focus that much on them. You all know what ISIS is doing. But there's this thing that they're doing about recruitment, which is one of the things I'm going to talk about. And here's a good example. That the message that they're pushing is one that is supposed to appeal to folks in the West. They're trying to recruit people in the West. This is a couple. They were arrested last year because they were trying to, or allegedly were trying to join ISIS in Syria and Iraq. They're from Mississippi. The woman, Jalen Young, cheerleader, 19 years old. Her father was a police officer, mother of the school principal, right? She converted to Islam. And the man, Mohammed Daklala, he psychology student. They were in Mississippi, right? And lived at home. They were arrested. And I think I saw recently that he has sort of publicly said, he was very sorry that he didn't realize what he was getting into. But the point, I wanted to show that because people are being affected by this. Some people, this message is resonating with them for some reason. Here are some attacks. There's the Pulse, the Orlando bombing. This one over here, that's the Nice attack in France. This summer there were so many things. My alma mater, I went to University of California, Berkeley, and I've been talking to people at Berkeley because this summer, Berkeley had 2 students killed in terrorist attacks. One of the Nice students was an exchange student who was in an entrepreneurship and technology program in France. And during their time there, all these study abroad students, they have a big thing at the Bastille Day. So he was one of the students. This college student was there, he was mowed down by the truck, and also one of the students in Bangladesh, or earlier during Ramadan, there was an attack in Bangladesh, and a Berkeley student was killed. So I've been talking to them because they're really, wondering, what do we do about this? So this is still going on. ISIS, when we talk about ISIS is really interesting. I'm not going to get into their history, but in terms of what they're doing right now, they have a strong concerted effort to appeal to people outside of the West to do in the West to either do 2 things: make hijrah and come join them in Syria and Iraq, or if you can't make hijrah, if you can't migrate, carry out attacks where you are. So look at what they say. This is in their latest magazine, right? This is a very glossy, very well put together magazine. Don't be taken in by the claims that the real jihad is giving dawah. This is what they're saying, right? They have great pictures. I'll show you some of their pictures. The blood of the disbelievers is obligatory to spill by default. The command is clear. And they go on with some references to Quranic ayah. They talk about, they're appealing to this idea of there's an ongoing crusade against Islam, right? You see what's happening in Iraq. You see what's happening in Syria, in Afghanistan. This is a crusader war. If the Tawagit have shut the door of hijrah in your faces, then open the door of jihad in theirs. What does that mean? Translation? Yeah, maybe you can't get to Syria like that couple, right? They got arrested because obviously the FBI is looking at people, blah, 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 right? So if you can't get out, take it to them where they are. So this is what they're calling for. And then they're saying this, the Crusaders and their Jewish allies and the puppets in the Gulf, this is all rhetoric, which is basically saying, look, the status quo, all these leaders, the Muslim world, they're really on the wrong side. So again, I don't need to quote all of this, but I just want to show you the references. These names, they say the Caliphate's soldiers, Muhammad Yusuf Abdul Aziz, that's a guy from Tennessee who killed at an army recruitment center a bunch of people, and then he was later killed. He, inspired by what he was seeing with ISIS. And Faisal Muhammad, one of the San Bernardino killers. Right, basically, that they're soldiers in this struggle, in this war. So this is propaganda, and it's propaganda for the person who's looking at what Islam is, looking at the conflicts that they're seeing in the world, looking at Muslims dying, and trying to figure out, well, what is the way to deal with it? What is the way to approach it? They're appealing to that. And they talk about right democracy. They're saying that those who are in the Crusader nations being ruled by will of the people, they're basically saying that if you're in that situation, you're implicated in the wars against Muslim nations. So they're appealing to this idea of consciousness. I mean, come on, nobody wants to be part of injustice. Nobody wants to be part of something that's unfair. So they're appealing to that sense. They have this narrative which calls on people to defend Muslim and defend Islam. So they're very clear. Don't believe when people say that jihad is giving dawah or it's jihad of the soul. No, jihad is killing the people who are against Islam, killing the Crusaders. This you all may have heard about, and this is in their same magazine. This is one of their recent magazines. They had an article which talks about kill the imams of kuffar in the West. Their magazine is called Davik, and they listed a bunch of people. They talk about people